David Clendon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it has been something of a marathon getting here, and I've only been involved in this longer process for a relatively short time, and was reflecting recently that it is a considerable learning experience witnessing the passing of a bill of this scale, and possibly once in a lifetime, because we don't often see a single piece of legislation that will have such a significant, wide-ranging effect as will this bill. And it was a wonderful opportunity to do a great deal of useful and good work. And unfortunately, it would seem that that opportunity has been missed, and that it will be the responsibility of the incoming council to endeavour to make the best that they can do, as somebody said, to endeavour to make the silk purse out of what's a distinctly sow's ear of a piece of legislation. Having said that, it is true, and it's been commented on already, that the bill came out of this committee a much better bill than it went in. And I believe that that was the direct result of those many hundreds of people who submitted in person, the thousands of people who submitted in print, email, however it might be, and just the sheer scale and scope of the opposition and the enthusiasm that this generated. It must be said, one very positive outcome of this bill undoubtedly is that people will be paying a great deal more attention to local government in Auckland this year than perhaps they have in the past. It's interesting that this bill, initially the idea, the principle of reviewing the governments, reforming the governments of Auckland region, actually had quite a lot of traction. It was a very popular idea some 18 months ago, and clearly the popularity has diminished substantially to the point now where it's actually quite difficult to find too many people who are entirely happy about the shape and form of this bill and the city structure, the legislation. Indeed, are there any? I'm sure there are a few. Yes, there's a few of them here today. But in the general public, I think there are few and far between. And that's an indication that the public's confidence, enthusiasm, perception of potential benefit for this reform has been seriously eroded and diminished over the course. And that has largely been a factor or a function of the process of this bill. An NGO, as we know, recently conducted our Auckland group conducted a little mini referendum of their own. They gave people the opportunity to vote, and out of the nearly 9,000 people who responded, 96% said they were unhappy about the process, the way in which this series of bills has passed through, been presented, and has got the final sign-off in this House. What came through very clearly and continues to come through is that there are two fundamental core beliefs or principles that people are unhappy about. And one of those is the loss of democracy. The other is the potential for loss of public ownership, control, management of assets that have been bought and paid for by generations of Aucklanders, generations of New Zealanders in fact, in which now we see that public ownership, public control, public management is seriously under threat by the various provisions of this bill. Democracy is something very dear to the hearts of New Zealanders. In a general way, the whole process and structure of this new super city diminishes the opportunity for democratic input. There are a number of very specific clauses, provisions within the bill which take away rights from Aucklanders that every other New Zealander will continue to have, and which Aucklanders will lose for at least 3 to 4 years. And the question of public ownership, as I say, we do rate the fact there is still a substantial belief in the value of maintaining public ownership and control of core assets like water, like transport, like access to parks and so on. We don't yet know, in fact, at one point it could be said that there was a surfeit of democracy in New Zealand. This, in a sense, is round two. In the late 80s, we know there was an amalgamation, and there was some rationale for that. As David Longy once famously referred to Auckland as a series of villages connected by a sewerage system. There was some value in the amalgamation of the 80s and the early 90s, and they were not without their hiccups and their bumps along the road. But in the intervening 20 years, there was a cohesion. The 7 districts, the 4 cities, the districts and the regional council did develop a sense of place, did develop their individual, unique identities, and they were powerful identities.